What's up, gentlemen? This is Rising Phoenix Podcast, a podcast about how to rise up after your divorce. I'm your host, divorce coach Michael Rhodes. Let's get into it. Thank you for joining me. So let's just jump right into it. Let's get your story and go from there.
All right. So my name's Brandon, and I was married to my wife, soon to be divorced, coming this week on the 16th. And we were married for 23 years, have a daughter, teenage daughter. We met and became best friends, and we hung out. We were inseparable. We talked all the time. We supported each other, and so we decided that we were going to start dating. There was a little things before that, and I think that's kind of what led to kind of establishing the relationship on its pathway down. That happened early on. Um, because we were best friends, she was kind of my wingman. I was kind of her wingman. We hung out. She started um, dating one of my best friends. At that time, I'd just gotten out of a long term relationship. So I'd been, for 2 years, I'd been single, and, I met her and we had been friends. And the minute she started dating my best friend, it created a sense of urgency for me with her.
Sure.
So, um, but at that time, during that 2 years, I'd got out of a toxic, very, very toxic relationship, and I had to shut down, close myself off emotionally, just to get away from this girl I'd been seeing for 3 years.
Mm.
And so I wasn't really emotionally ready to dive into something that intense, especially with her. But I did it because it was an emergency situation,
Right.
and I didn't want to take that chance to lose her. So I think that kind of started off our marriage of 23 years kind of off on a foot that I wasn't emotionally ready. It's kind of an asshole at the first of the relationship.
I can relate to
Uh,
that.
but we managed to work through it. I ended up growing up, getting a real job, handling my responsibilities. We were married for 10 years before we had my daughter. And during that time, there was all kinds of reasons why it took 10 years, female issues,
Mm.
all of that stuff, lots of surgeries
Mm.
for female related issues. We had to go through IVF to conceive my daughter, so there was lots of hormones and things going on there. So on the intimacy side and throughout our marriage, it was always kind of a struggle of that, um, you know, female problems and
Mm.
things like that was going on.
Gotcha. Did that
Um,
cause issues between you two? I'm guessing. Did it cause a strain on the relationship?
it did at various points. I mean, not that our intimacy was bad, but the timing and fulfilling each other's needs. So, for instance, because of her female issues, she would, start that pre-monthly
Mm.
hormonal thing that goes on with women. I can't really explain it. I don't want to offend any women out there,
No, I got
but it it would start 2 weeks early, so it would leave like a week window in the month where we had the ability to like maybe have some intimacy, and it always caused this back and forth pull. And I was
Mm.
very understanding about it and sympathetic to it. I worked around it. We tried to, so it always created this strain through our marriage. But again, we were really good at everything but being us.
Mm.
And so, you know, financially we're successful, professionally we were successful, on the same page in regards to religion and beliefs and structures, and we did 9 out of 10 things very well. But us, I think the best friendship kind of is what kept everything rolling.
Mm.
And then we had our daughter, and everything was rolling pretty long. I mean, we had our struggles with being new parents and being married 10 years without a kid around,
Cool.
adjusting to new routines. It wasn't something that you expect. So it's it was a struggle there. So
Right.
we were rocking along. We would have our issues with the female problems ongoing. She had 4 surgeries. Uh, she had the loss of 2 babies, one tubal, one during the IVF. But I was always there to support her and take care of her.
Did any did any communication issues pop up from the get-go? Did you notice any issues in terms of how you two were able to deal with these problems?
Yeah, so so she is a very successful professional woman, and so the way she deals with things is in tasks oriented,
Mm.
and she's also very on her own little island, and she internalizes everything where I externalize everything, and so it created this push pull dynamic.
Mm.
And how we communicated that push pull dynamic, I would push for what I needed out of the relationship. She would take it as me being critical
Mm.
and then shut down and build walls.
Gotcha.
So that was a slow poison in regards to anything with us over the course of 23 years. So about 2 years ago, she finally decided to get a hysterectomy. Um, when she did that, she finally got off birth control for all the female issues.
Mm.
She's in her mid 40s, showing some symptoms, in my opinion. Now, I'm not a woman, so I can't speak to that. But about being premenopausal, and that kind of amplified everything
Mm.
to the downfall of our marriage, which led to her asking for a divorce in August.
In August. Okay. Was that a complete shock to you?
It blindsided me because I was always of the mindset that because we were best friends, because we have been through all these things, because I'd helped her with her dad's passing, I was always there, supportive, and we did all these things right. That our marriage and our vows were strong enough to be able to work through anything.
Yeah. And so when that hit you, how did that affect you mentally?
Mentally, at first, I went through a spiral the first weekend. So she told me on a Friday night. That weekend was a spiral of out of control drinking and um, emotions and all of that.
Yeah.
And so after I got through that weekend, I focused back and I said, okay, how can we handle this? Well, number one, can I fix it?
Right.
Right. Right. Can I make it right? Because that's what I do. I try to make things right.
Sure. I think that's what all men do.
Yeah. And she had already made up her mind. She had months and months to process this.
Right.
Right. So there was no changing her mind. So next phase was, I guess, acceptance for me.
How long did that take?
It took a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Took a couple of weeks to finally realize that this is headed the way it is, and so I decided to just sit down and talk to her and say, how are we going to handle this?
Right.
And so we decided that we're going to handle this the best way we can. We want to remain friends because we had that strong friendship, and even at her suggestion, remain intimate. We slept in the same bed still together. We're having sex 3 and 4 times a week. I guess it was more like a trauma bonding more than anything.
Yeah.
So everything was, okay. We sat down. She's a professional. So when we divided out assets and we were looking at custodies and we were looking at all these things, we had the agreement rocking in place. Everything was good. Everything was good. Everything was lined out. I mean, so we decided to file ourselves because we thought, hey, we can save all this lawyer crap,
Sure.
save some money, file it ourselves. We agree 100% on this. And so we went down that road, and the courts found a few little things that were wrong. And so they rejected our initial divorce because, we wanted some customizable things in there. And with state forms, there's really no leeway in for custom agreements.
Gotcha.
So I suggested to her that, hey, let's go find a mediator. Let's get them to draw up all the paperwork and all this stuff. And during this time, in October, I secured a place for me and my daughter, and we were buying furniture because I was leaving everything behind because she was in such this large house that I didn't need to gut the house and leave it empty. And we wanted to make sure we set each other up for success and moving on. And so I'd secured a place in October. I'd planned the movers to come out in November, and furniture was arriving November for my daughter and myself in the new place. And so we had this plan and everything was kind of going along. So we come November, mid-November, I had the movers scheduled, and the Friday before I'm supposed to move, we have a standing lunch date, and we still do, of being able to sit down and talk with each other about what's going on with my daughter, just have some conversations about how things are going. And so I call her up and say, "Hey, well, what are we doing for lunch?" And she's like, "Well, I've got emergency meeting, and but after that, I'll give you a call."
Mhm.
I said, "Okay." Well, about 2 hours later, I don't hear from her, and so I give her a call, and the phone picks up, and I hear road noise in the background, and then I hear, "Is that Daddy?" And I'm like, "Okay, this is a Friday. My daughter's supposed to be in school.
Mm.
What the hell is going on, and why is she in the car?"
Right.
So I call back, and immediately the phone's turned off.
Mm.
So I go find my phone, and I find that they're about 50 miles or an hour away. She's headed to her mom's house
Ah,
in Austin, 300 miles away.
geez.
So I can't reach out. It's obviously she's leaving town.
Right.
I have this feeling something's fixing to go down.
Yeah.
Right. So she jets out of town. I don't hear from both my daughter and my wife that whole day. I'm trying to scramble because that's the weekend I'm moving,
Right.
and just to kind of figure it all out.
Mhm.
Well, the next day she calls me and she's like, "Look, there was a stress and a pressure cooker building in the house that I could no longer deal with,
Mm.
and I needed you out." And I said, "Well, I had the mover scheduled this Sunday." And she goes, "Well, you're getting hit with papers, a restraining order removing you from the house, and me and your daughter are not coming back until you're out of the house."
So at this point, I'm sure most guys are thinking what I'm thinking, and that is there has to be somebody else. Is that the case? Was there another man involved in this scenario?
No, there's not. I mean, that's the one thing about this whole thing is that there's never been any trust issues, cheating, lying, financial problems.
Hmm.
There's still not anybody to this day. She's one of those that goes to work, she comes home, she sits on the couch, she watches TV, rinse, repeat. She doesn't go work out at weird times. She doesn't
Right.
leave her place of work at lunch. She doesn't. There's no, I don't want to say there's no opportunity, but
Right.
there's just no indicators that's the case, and still no indicators
Right.
today that's the case. And
So
so
how long before she came back then with your daughter?
So I got moved out, and I even went as far as to, because I took the master bedroom furniture, I moved the guest furniture into our master bedroom and set it all up for her. And
Hmm.
all anything that I took from the house, I made sure things were replaced, and I cleaned it and I set it all nice and neat, and moved some pictures around and hung them up. So when she walked in the door, she had nothing to complain about. There was no issues,
Hmm.
that the place was set up and left in good shape, because I didn't want to cause any more havoc that's already being, rained down upon this situation.
Right.
So she comes back on that Monday,
Hmm.
and she comes over to my new place, and we have a brief conversation, and I told her, I said, "You knew I was moving." I said, it didn't have to come to this. And we had all this agreement. And she's like, "Well, it was just a pressure cooker for me, and I felt like I needed to take some kind of action." So that Friday, that she left, I retained a lawyer. Now we've got lawyers involved,
Mm,
and we tried to avoid that at all cost.
right.
Um, and now it's this big mess of, now I can't trust her. I don't know what's going to happen at this point.
Right.
Um,
This speaks
it's
to her inability to communicate. If right, I mean, if there was an issue that led to her doing what she did, she clearly didn't uh, bring you in on any of that, right?
Yeah, I mean, she's the horrible communicator when it comes to expressing her feelings.
Right.
I think that's what makes her so good professionally.
No.
Um, she talks in a lot of gray areas, never answers any direct questions,
Mm,
type thing, and the communication part of it was really our biggest issue, and
right.
so I think if she just would have communicated all of this, we probably could have worked through it, but she
Sure.
she internalizes everything and then it just finally it erupts.
Right.
So
So after you get this incident, you get served papers. What was your mental state at that point? How were you feeling?
my mental state was a disaster. So let me tell you what I think set off the bomb with her.
Mm,
So during all this time, we're living together, we're trying to work this out, stress is building. I'm still kind of an emotional wreck from it. So I go and see my doctor about, hey man, this is getting to be too much. I can't focus at work.
right.
I can't handle daily things. I'm walking around like a zombie. He's like, well, let's get you something to help deal with this. So he prescribes me an antidepressant,
Mhm.
um, and he said this should help level things out and get you through this. And then once you get through it, we'll get you off of it, and you can start to learn to deal with things. And of course, I'm talking to a therapist a little bit, and you can learn to start dealing with these emotions and things that's going on. About so I start taking the antidepressant, and about 4 days into it, we go on a Sunday. We go eat dinner and we go run errands, and we're buying play things for her and me to split everything out, and we go eat dinner, and we walk back in the house, and we go to finish laundry, and I'm helping her hang up laundry, and I have this panic attack, and I've never really experienced a panic attack before, this moment, and I experienced something that hit me, and I felt like it crippled me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't stand up. Everything was spinning. It was something like I said I've never experienced before. So I go down. I go to my like little man cave area. I have a recliner in there, and I lay back in the recliner in the dark, and I'm just trying to collect my thoughts. And she walks in, and she's like, "What's going on with you?" And I tell her, I said, I don't know. I just, I'm I'm feeling like crap, and I don't know what's going on with me. My head's in 1,000 different places, and she's one of these that, again, not a great communicator, not a great empathy or sympathy type of person. So she's like, you need to get your shit together, and you need to pull yourself up by the bootstraps, because and I like that, just kind of like modified things to 1,000%. So she goes back into her area. I'm listening to the TV. Everything in the house is like nails on a chalkboard. All of this is going on. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm the problem here. I'm the problem in my daughter's life. I'm the problem in my wife's life. I'm in the problem in my family's life. I am the problem. I need to not be the problem anymore. So I just get up, I get in my truck, and I start heading. I leave. I don't tell anybody anything. I turn off my phone, and I am headed as far east as I can drive to the smallest town on the East Coast as I can get away from, and I'm just going to disappear like the witness protection program.
Right.
And so I'm driving down the road, and I get to the exit to my new place, and I guess I have this come to Jesus moment, if that's what you want to call it.
Mm,
And I say, what the hell am I doing here?
right.
So I exit off, and I pull in, and I go into my new place. I still got the phone turned off, and I just sit in the dark and just try to breathe and collect my thoughts, and find out what the hell is going on with me.
Right.
So about 2 hours later, I finally kind of everything kind of comes back down.
Mhm.
I'm functioning again, and so I go back home, and she's she's pissed off. My daughter's upset. They thought they didn't know what to think. Nobody knew where I was at.
Right.
They were panicked, and I think that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, which led to the restraining orders and the forcing me out of the house
Hmm.
type thing, and no empathy to the reaction I had. And I realized it was the medication that was doing it to me.
Right.
So I immediately got off the medication. The next day, I started feeling better. I pulled my wife and my daughter in, and I apologized for my reaction and explained to them, try to kind of how I was feeling and
Right.
what was going on with me. And of course, still kind of know, because she has never experienced that, she has no sympathy to it.
Right.
It's not, she's never walked in the shoes of dealing with something like that. And so it just kind of set off this whole events. And I think after that point in time is when she's like, I had enough. This is too much for me.
Mm.
And that's what led to forcing me out of the house, even though I had the mover scheduled for that weekend to move out.
Right.
So,
Sounds like maybe she realized she was going to lose control of you and sort of panicked.
mhm,
Yeah.
yeah. So, um, after she come back, we, I made the decision that, you know, uh, I have to make this work for my daughter. So
Yeah.
I have to have a relationship with her. She still is my best friend, even though she is still my friend. I don't want to say best anymore because there's a loss of trust now
Sure.
that's happened, but she still is my friend. And so I'm thinking to myself, what am I going to do here? How am I going to handle this? And so, after spending a couple of nights with my daughter and after thinking through it, I said, all right, I have got to be the bigger person in this. I have got to do what benefits me. I've got to do what benefits my daughter. And at that point, if I need to sacrifice myself in the short term
Right.
to make sure that, number one, this agreement, that I don't make her mad and she goes for something like standard custody,
Right.
that if this agreement is going to go through and that we're going to be able to function as good co-parents, I have got to sacrifice maybe a little bit of myself or a majority of myself
Yeah.
to ensure that um, you know the outcome for my daughter is in the best case scenario that it can be.
So would you say you have some anger towards your soon to be ex-wife?
Oh, I have a lot of anger, and right now I've put it all to the side. So I've compartmentalized it in a box. I've put
Yeah.
it up on the shelf. I'm getting through this divorce, which, like I said, should be finalized next week.
Yeah.
And I don't let it rear its ugly head, and I'm going to deal with that at another time.
Right.
Right now, I'm sacrificing myself. I'm going over there. I'm helping her get set up. I'm moving pictures on the wall. I'm
Right.
I'm repairing breakers that are GFCI breakers that are weak. I'm making sure the internet's up and running and the TVs are functioning, and I'm doing all these things. And she's inviting me over for dinner. So, because I'm helping her out, and we're having this dynamic where we're helping each other out.
Right.
And it's a mess for me,
Yeah.
but in that moment, it is not about her and it's not about me. It's about my daughter.
Yeah.
And so I make that sacrifice, and then I come home. And if I need to break down or I need to scream at the walls, I do it in private and I handle it within myself.
Yeah, well, you're a stronger man than I, because I struggle with that portion of it. My anger is tough for me to contain. I don't I don't yell or anything of that nature. I just avoid. I don't have anything to say to her. My view is, and I'm not disagreeing with your view. I think it's probably the better one. My view is, it's your decision to end the relationship. Then that means it's ended in terms of, like, I'm not going to help you set up your internet. I'm not going to help you with whatever your problems are. That's your problem. Unfortunately, that I know that it isn't the best way for my daughter, but I think I will slowly, I hope so, slowly get to your state of mind, perhaps just in a different route. But let's talk about some of the lessons you've learned about being in a relationship, or some of the mistakes that you realized that were made during the course of the marriage that led to where you're at now? Besides communication on her end, what about your end?
So for me, a lot of it had to do with the way I process things, that pushing nature, right? So I'm a problem solver, I'm a fixer professionally. I can solve problems. I get in, I jump in, I deal with it, and also with the way I feel about things, and so I'm a very vocal guy.
Mm.
And so with that, the one lesson I learned is how I vocalize my issues,
Mm.
and how I push my issues, because I had a tendency to push my issues to my outcome,
Right,
not necessarily the outcome that was the benefit of both parties,
right,
but it was the outcome that I had planned, because I'm a planner and I'm looking through A through Z scenarios.
right,
And I know what each scenario is going to plan out. And so I want it to work out to the plan that I had put in place.
right.
And so the one thing I've learned through all of this is my communication skills. Even though I communicated, it was not necessarily to the outcome that needed to happen. It was the outcome that I thought needed to happen. And so, that's one of the things that I learned here is more of go with the flow instead of kind of direct.
Right. Well, it can be tough. I mean, I was in a similar scenario. It can be tough when the other party is so reserved and you feel like you have to pull it out of them. That can be frustrating. And finding a way to give them not only the space to speak, but almost the encouragement, because maybe they've never had that before. Maybe that's the way that they were, you know, raised by their father, or whatever other circumstances there were or are. But it is a difficult bridge the gap sometimes, because it's completely opposite styles. And if you were the kind of guy like I sounds like we were similar, and most men are, we got a goal, we're going to go hit it. And if you're going to sit over there quietly and just, in the along for the ride, not expressing yourself, then it's going to continue. And I think what happens, and I'm not a professional, but I've heard a few of these stories, and I think is that they eventually sit in the back and just build resentment over time, and to a point that something at some point pushes them to a point where they can no longer do that. And unfortunately, you're completely caught off guard, because for the whole time they're just along for the ride.
Yeah, I think the one thing I should have done that I didn't do is when she would escape to her little island and pull back and put up her walls,
Yep.
she would sit on the couch and watch the women's shows that typically are watched. And when she would pull back, I would go to my man cave, because and not engage, and then I would withdraw.
Right.
And I should have sat down right beside her and not forced her to engage,
Right.
but actively engaged with her over time. And I didn't. I think that's the one mistake that I made
Yeah.
is just suck it up. This is who she is. Sit down and pull her out in a positive way, instead of
Right.
saying she goes to her island, I'm going to go to my island, and we're going to let this thing fester.
Yeah. True. Very true. And any other things that you found that you could work on for yourself going forward for the next one?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's the biggest revelation that I had is again how I go about being that partner.
Yeah.
Because she was reserved and didn't like creating ripples in the pond, and she didn't she I made all the decisions. I provided the structure. I was the safety. I was the rock. I did all this. And so she calls it now I was controlling, but I wasn't controlling, because she never really wanted to make the decisions.
Right.
So they were typically my outcome, and she blames me for that and says I was controlling, but wasn't really controlling. It's just she never made a decision. And now I've, one of the things that I think I need to work on is sitting down and actually coming together and getting that input instead of letting them sit on the sidelines,
Right.
actively engage and say, look, I really need your opinion on this.
Right.
I really need you, or maybe even force them to make that decision instead of myself.
Do you think it's a matter of also being mindful of not, I don't want to say avoiding, but at least acknowledging if you are in a relationship with that type of person that you see that, but maybe even before getting to that, is that something you would consider avoiding altogether and maybe just finding a more outgoing type of person?
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, we did 9 out of 10 things right, but it's the one thing at this point now, I would rather find that one thing and
Yeah.
work on the other nine.
Yeah. Amen.
And because I think if you find the right person that's a good teammate, that's compassionate and loving and embracing and warm and empathetic and sympathetic, they're going to be on a team with you. And then you can come together on all the other nine things.
Right.
Our problem is we had all the other nine things, but we didn't have that part of it that really would have strengthened
Yeah.
the whole complete package.
So
So
let's swing back to your anger.
yeah,
I know for me, it's like I said, it is a bit of a struggle at times. Sometimes more than others. But how do you? Is that something you've always been able to do, or always did in terms of compartmentalizing your anger, or is that something that you developed strictly because of the situation and trying to do what's best for your daughter?
I developed that strictly in this situation. My throughout my whole throughout my whole life, I grew up out in the oil fields with the roughnecks, going to school. I had outlets for my anger, whether it was football or Golden Gloves boxing
Oh,
or
nice.
karate and MMA. I was always active, so I always had outlets for my anger. It's just, I guess, it's part of the nature of growing up of dealing with all that. And I was never angry towards her. I was never abusive towards her. I never yelled at her. I never put a finger on her. I was never any of that.
Hmm.
I always had outlets for my anger. And then when this hit and the anger built, I said, okay, at this point, my outlet for my anger is going to be put on the shelf, but my outlet is going to be focusing on making this right and making this a good environment.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do what's right by my daughter, independent of my soon to be ex-wife, and make this thing work because I have to raise a functioning daughter in the world that we have right now, and I need to make sure she's prepared. And then I'll pull that box down when all this gets settled, and I'll re-enroll in some martial arts, or I'll start lifting weights, or I'll find another outlet for my anger with all this, and I'll deal with it.
How often do you have to sort of check yourself with that anger? Do you find yourself having to do that frequently? And if so, even if not, how do you do that? How do you stop yourself from being angry in a particular moment where anger is probably justified and warranted?
Um, I have to either a walk away, just say time out, if it gets to that point,
Yeah.
or if I know I wake up that morning, because there's some mornings I wake up just pissed off,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Just pissed off at the world,
Yep.
and I just a quick 50 push-ups and some setups and get in the shower and just go through the day. If that's what I've got to do, that's what I got to do. If I got to get to work and I got to blast the hardest metal music I can find on my phone and just let them scream it out for me,
Yeah.
that's what I do. And so that's how I'm dealing with it now. And
Yep.
I, anger, I've come to the realization that anger serves no benefit in any of this
Yeah.
at this point.
You're 100% correct. I admire you, sir, for your ability to not only recognize it, because some don't. I at least recognize it. I'm just shitty at dealing with it. But your ability to refocus your energy or expel that energy in a different way, it's admirable. And I hope that other men hear this and are inspired by it. I certainly am, and
Well,
that's why I really wanted to have you on. This is an admirable way to be, and you should be proud of yourself for how you're handling it.
if I had, for the guys out there that do have anger issues or going through this emotional wreck, I completely empathize for them, and I would tell them, you know, the only thing that matters in divorce with kids is the kids.
Yeah.
So refocus that anger, refocus that energy, refocus that emotion to your kids. Don't burden your kids with it.
Yeah.
Don't lay it on their shoulders, but focus it on them. And if you have to suck it up and just smile at the X to know that you're bettering your kids' outcome in the end of this thing, then focus all that energy on doing the right things, being the adult. And that's the big thing for me is I'm going to handle this like an adult.
Yeah.
I'm going to handle this like a responsible human being, and I am going to do ultimately what's right in the scheme of things in regard to my daughter.
No, you're a strong man, and I envy you. And like I said, I hope other men will draw inspiration for what you're able to do.
I mean, I made my mistakes, right?
Sure.
Like I said, don't burden your kids. One of the things is with my daughters, I try to be open and truthful with my kids as much as possible. I think that's a key thing with being a parent.
Yeah.
Is being open and truthful with your kids. And sometimes you want to be truthful, but you don't realize that at their age, some of that truth is a little hard to shoulder. So, when we first went through this divorce, I sat down and had a conversation with my daughter, and sometimes you tell them how you're feeling. Sometimes you tell them that, hey, dad's going to be alone this weekend, and it's tough and it's hard on dad, and you're trying to get them to kind of understand the emotions, because you want them to embrace their emotions. You want to teach them to embrace it in a positive way, but also by telling them that they shoulder that burden of dad's going to be alone. I don't want dad to be alone.
Right.
And so I've had to learn through this to temper my honesty and truthfulness in regards to this, and be very careful in what I say and how I lay out that openness and truthfulness with her.
Yeah. Amen. Well, I think it's amazing your ability to do that. And like I said, I envy you, and I certainly think you should be proud of yourself for sure. Can you give us your best final words of wisdom for guys that are going through this process, either right in the beginning, where they just found out, or where they're at, where you're at in terms of, the divorce is nearly finalized, or it had just been finalized? You speak to those things.
Yeah. So my advice would be listen to your podcast with the lawyer.
Thanks.
Because I didn't do that, and I should have, right?
Yeah.
We tried to handle it ourselves. There's going to be too much stress and emotion involved. Let the professional deal with it.
Yeah.
Go ahead and pony up the money.
Yeah.
Even if it's amicable, let them deal with the details. Let them work it out. And so that takes a burden off of your shoulders that doesn't create stress in the environment. The second thing I would tell them is also do that. Go to the lawyer, file first, and then that protects you of being able to move out of the house in regards to all that, because if you stay in that house, it is not going to end well. So get out of the house the proper way, and I think that'll alleviate a lot of stress in the situation. That won't lead to I think the divorce will be much more smooth in the end, barring that there's no infidelity or cheating or trust or any of that broken. If it's just a divorce, just get out of the situation and start your healing. And that's why I would advise them to go to the lawyer and go ahead and get that done, so you are able to move out, so you are able to do those things, so you do not create a more hostile environment.
Amen. Brendan, I want to thank you for telling your story, for providing what I believe is inspiration, certainly to me, and I hope to the other men. It's a good thing you've done, and I truly, truly appreciate it.
Man, I appreciate everything that you're doing, and every guy on the Facebook page. If they need to reach out to me, I'm available. I'll make my time to sit down and talk with guys if they just want advice or if they just want to vent.
Yeah.
I don't have that person I could vent to. My wife was that person I could vent to, and now I don't have that person. So I'm learning how to have that person, and I want to help those people out there. So.
Well, we're about ready to. I think tonight we'll be announcing some group chats that we're going to do. I think at this point we'll probably do 3 a week. I think it'll probably be different themes each week, and I would love to have you tied into that. Perhaps maybe even lead one specifically, maybe on how to deal with anger, because to me you're a Jedi over there on how you're dealing with this, and I think it would be a great service to the men.
I'd be more than happy to.
All right. Well, great, Brandon. Thank you again for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
Yep. Take care. Thank you so much for watching and/or listening. Since my separation in July of 2019, I have done an incredible amount of work on myself. I've had many different therapists, life coaches, and went through different programs. I've taken all that I've learned and put it into my own program called Forged by Fire. If you are interested in having me help you navigate your divorce, please hit my website, risingphoenixdivorcecoach.com. I look forward to working with you.